All right. See people filtering in. Thanks everyone for being here. We got a lot of folks here from all across the country, which is fantastic. Dustin, this was a very, very popular topic. No surprise
Yes.
there.
No surprise.
No surprise. I had a lot of people, we had a lot of people sign up, obviously, and a lot of people ask for replays and just a big variety of nonprofits here. So thank you all for being here. And I can see people filing in. So while we're doing that, I'm just going to introduce us. So I'm Peter. I'm the managing partner here at Anania Bailey, joined by my partner and our account executive, Dustin.
Hello, everyone.
And I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we do. We're a branding and advertising agency based out of Portland, Maine. And we focus on working with nonprofits on 4 services: branding, websites, providing ongoing support. That might be advertising, social media. I know, Dustin, we're doing a really big recruitment advertising campaign for a nonprofit right now, which is exciting. And then we're doing a lot of video. We do a lot of video work for nonprofits as well. I did list some of our recent clients here, just so you can kind of get a flavor of who we work with. But we've been working on a lot of really great projects, and we're glad to have you all here. All right, so Dustin, I picked this statistic just to kind of get the juices flowing here, because our attendees, they likely have a website redesign for their nonprofit in their future. So the quote, this is from a study from Stanford, and I think it gets us thinking here. And the quote is 75% of users admit to making judgments on an organization's credibility based on their website design. Now, if you guys can not be shy and maybe put your thoughts in chat about this, do you think it's higher than 75% of users make judgment based off of a website design, or is it lower, or was it surprised, or were you surprised by that? And while folks are doing that, Dustin, I'm gonna bring it over to you. When you heard this statistic, what did you think?
I'm surprised it's not even a little higher. When I think about this, your website is the foundation for your brand. So when people are going onto your website, they're usually making their first judgment calls. So whether they have, been reached out by word of mouth, or by some level of advertisement, or some public relations that have been out there to, bring the people, to your, to attention to your brand itself. Your website is really where they're going to go. It's the foundation for every part of a marketing strategy, and it really should be top of mind. So I'm actually surprised it's not a little higher than 75%, Peter.
And we have some people in chat agreeing with you, and there's going to be some participation on this webinar, so don't be shy. Go ahead and chime in on chat if you have any thoughts or if you have any questions, and thanks for that, Dustin. And yeah, so I chose this as a way to kick us off, because your website, using it as a way to match your brand image with your brand identity, that's one possible goal for why you're planning for a new website. It's certainly not the only goal. Dustin, you're going to talk a little bit about some other problems nonprofits face that lead them to doing a redesign. But the point is we know you as an attendee on this webinar, if you're thinking about a website, you face a challenge of really getting it right the first time when you do the redesign. And Dustin, you and I talked about why this is. And part of why this is because, your website is a major asset for your organization and your brand, but you're going to be stuck with it for a while generally. So it's really important to get it right the first time for your nonprofit, because it's not uncommon for nonprofits to have their website for 5 years or 10 years, and both are not uncommon. So doing it right the first time, it's about, you're making an investment and you're making a time investment. So you really do want to make it right. And redoing the website is going to take up a lot of horsepower within your organization. So it's really important that you do it right the first time. And that's really why we're doing this webinar, is just to empower you to make sure you're doing things right. we say this commonly in the office, Dustin. It's like, when was the best time to start a website or do a rebrand? It was, 3 years ago, or it was 3 months ago, because we need this asset to start working for our nonprofit and to start furthering our mission. And we needed it 3 years ago to start doing that. So it's really important to get it right the first time. Dustin, do you have any more thoughts before we dig in a little bit further?
No, I mean, I think that, you pretty much covered everything that my mind's on for when we're talking about this.
So the problem goes a little bit deeper. And Dustin, I wanted you to kind of just talk about some of the common problems we see with nonprofits that leads them to really feel like, hey, it's really time for us to embark on doing a website redesign. So I've listed some of them. You may have some others, but can you just kind of take us through your thoughts on digging a little bit deeper?
Yeah. So, I mean, when we're thinking about, the website, like what are the major things we're going to be tackling? So a big thing that I always go to is functionality. Usually the first thing you think about when you're going across, why should we be considering a new website, is usually that something's broken. What parts of the site are just not working for us anymore? Can things be more efficient? Is there whole parts that, that we're not getting the right information from people? So functionality is usually the first kind of clue that you're kind of thinking about a new website. And, for us, we're always thinking about, what in terms of functionality is, if it's not broken, how can it just be better? So we think about, how can we, have an automation added to the actual site? How can we make things easier for your teams, for your organization, if there were a certain level of automation in the site to provide you the right information? One example is that we recently built a WordPress plugin for one of our clients that needed to have like Google Maps API in it, and it really just needed to it needed that extra functionality. So nothing was quite broken, but they needed to be able to use a map to make sure that their services are provided to the right people, and that people could have a much easier way of navigating that part of their site. So when we're thinking about this, functionality is huge. Going beyond that, we talk about, branding, messaging, and design. Of course, those are kind of our bread and butter, being both an advertising and branding agency. When we're talking about that, we think about not just how it looks, but also, what's the information on the page? How are people interpreting the brand mission? Is your mission first and foremost on that site? Is your vision statement as clear as possible? And if you're trying to enact action from people, are those calls to action really defined for people to click and make a move on? So it's really important that it not just looks good, but it also feels like the brand offline should feel like the brand online, and that messaging is really driving people through your site to collect as much information for them to take action. We've done this with almost every one of our website projects. So, there's too many of them to answer that. But, a couple of the ones that we find always so distinct is when we are developing a brand with their website, really thinking about just how important it is that every part of the site, whether you're on the thank you page or whether you jump on and what we call the Jumbotron, the very first image you see on the homepage, every part of it should be calling out your brand, should feel all the same across the site. And there shouldn't be any kind of discrepancy, when people are exploring and starting to learn more about you. And then, of course, the last issue is user experience and user journey. So kind of with that messaging and functionality, we like to think about, going beyond that. What is the user experience? Is it easy to navigate your site? Is it easy to submit information? If there are, certain products or services, that you provide, are they is, very clear? Can they get to them? Can they take action? What are the roadblocks there? We think a lot about how when somebody jumps onto the home screen, where are they going? How is that home page set up? What are the most important things that need to be in front of them, so you're not burying the lead and you're losing potential users that might benefit from your services. So we've had a couple of different clients with that. One of our big ones just recently is we actually worked with a law firm, not a nonprofit, but a law firm. And everybody knows who's been on a law website, it can be terrible trying to get around and find the right information and know that it's the right firm to choose when you're facing, a situation where you need a lawyer. And one of our biggest challenges was exactly that, creating an information architecture for them that allowed the user experience to be nice and easy, finding exactly where they need to be, giving just the right information that they need, and not overwhelming them with all of the sort of nuances of law that kind of just gets people to step away from their computer and have to come back to it. So, user experience and user journey is a huge thing for us to consider when we're when you're thinking about redeveloping that site.
Thanks, Dustin. I'd love to hear from our attendees. What do you feel like your website, within the common issues Dustin just mentioned, what do you feel like you might be lacking? Are you lacking with functionality? Could your messaging and branding and design be stronger? Or is it user experience and user journey, or those things that you're concerned about and working on? So I'd love to don't be shy. We'd love to hear that.
Yeah. If you just hate that color that's all over your site and you just wish it wasn't even part of your brand, I mean, anything, we understand. We've seen all of it before.
Leah says more mobile functionality. Yeah, that's a common one.
Huge one. Yeah, both for the user experience and all the above.
Functionality is a big one. We're going to work with a nonprofit on association nonprofit, and they're dealing with some functionality issues across all the different operations, whether it's bookkeeping, administrative, and marketing, and having a portal for their members. So functionality, it's probably functionality is probably the one that we hear the most, Dustin.
Yeah. And then content funneling too. A lot of websites now where a lot of organizations are developing their own content, trying to provide value online in several different forms, whether it's resources or blogs or videos or some sort of content library. And everybody needs a little help with the organization of that, because it can get inflated really quickly.
We got some more chats coming in. Anne-Marie, that's a great question. I'm gonna ask that to Dustin at the end, but thanks for putting that in.
All right, we got a bunch then.
I'll surprise you with it, Dustin. Don't look at it. Okay.
I'm not.
Fantastic.
Eyes up.
So just to tell you where we're going from here in the webinar, we wanted to kind of pose the problem we see. Then we want to take you through just three things. So we don't want to throw too much at you, but we think these are going to be three valuable sections. And the first is really gaining clarity on what your nonprofit's trying to accomplish with your website redesign. Dustin previously was our creative director. He's now account executive. So he worked with, he guided a lot of our nonprofit clients through that exercise. So great to hear his expertise on that. We're gonna kind of have a little bit of exercise on thinking about helping you determine your budget, or really what budget to expect. And then we're going to give you some tips on how to find the right partner. And within that, I'm going to give my RFP tips. So awesome. So Dustin, I have our little guru in the background here, gaining clarity.
I love it.
So bring us through this.
Yes. So gaining clarity. So that's always the tough part. That's the first step to really get, and what I usually, provide as a tip for this is like, don't get caught up in the nuts and bolts. So many organizations, when they think about redoing their website, or, like thinking about, like trying to solve a functionality issue, they get a little too fixated on the solution and not enough on partnership that they should be building, because your web designer, whether you're going with an agency, you're going with a small shop, you're going with a talented freelancer, that relationship is going to go beyond just the development of the site and really secure a long-term success. Because just as Peter put it earlier, right, what decisions and you make now, the investment you're making now is something that's going to stay with your organization for several years. So it's good to think a little bit beyond just like, okay, we need to have this one thing. And I've did a little bit of research and I saw this WordPress plugin does this thing, and it can get really caught in the weeds if you're not open to having those discussions with your web design partner and really thinking more about how can we solve this and solve this long term, because they're going to be able to help to guide you through some of those things. And sometimes it will be just that WordPress plugin. Sometimes it'll be something that they can create custom, and a custom solution is going to be the best option. So don't get too caught up in the nuts and bolts. The next thing is defining the organizational goal you're trying to accomplish. So once you kind of get an understanding of like, all right, the functionality isn't great, we could really upgrade with the design, we redid part of our logo, we never got, translated to the site, defining the next step is what goals are you trying to reach? That's always huge, because it should be aligning itself with your marketing goals, your business goals. Your website should reflect all the efforts you're making off your website, because essentially, as we kind of put it earlier, right, whether it's, people are reaching out to them from word of mouth or through advertisement, through campaigns, whatever way people are starting to get cognizant of your organization, they're going to go to your website, that foundational piece. So your website needs to be able to align with those goals for that strategy. So a bit of that strategy needs to be put in place for solving those issues and really maximizing the website redesign to, express your brand and to bring people to the right solution. And then the next step for gaining clarity, of course, is sometimes it's hard to define those goals if you don't have enough data. So gaining data throughout your organization. So what does that look like? Depending if you're a small organization or if you're an organization of a few thousand, it doesn't matter. Either way, you need to start taking an account of information inside the organization and outside. So internally, whether it's a survey, it's a conversation, it's a notes, whatever it is, talking to different people about what this website needs to become, how does it fit their need, how is it addressing those goals? So talking to employees, department leaders, management, middle management, talking to stakeholders, board members, making sure we're having their buy-in, especially on a project, an investment this large, talking to your marketing and communications department. And of course, any owners, CEOs, presidents, leadership needs to be involved. And then, why don't you think about outside, take that external survey, talk to customers, talk to people that the nonprofit serves, talk to their families, talk to vendors, subcontractors, any type of relationship where you're building, where you have that kind of back and forth that, they work with you. And then of course, any type of community relations, whether it's, from board to board or part of a larger organization in your state or within your specialization. That's really important to get that kind of information from people that know you, to make sure that you're aligning those goals correctly and you're making your website work for you. And then of course, the last one is map out who to involve. So especially when you're getting all of that data, you want to make sure, who's going to be a part of this process, because it is a process. So, who's a part of pre-planning, who is a part of the RFP process, who is a part of the kickoff, more of a brand immersion, who's going to be meeting the agency or the small shop, your website partner. And then of course, who is going to be a part of that approval process. And it's important to know, those different stakeholders and have an understanding of, any project like this, you want to have the right people involved, and you want to make sure that you have you don't want to involve the entire organization. Usually you want to make sure you have key people in each part that are going to have some level of input, and then be able to have all that kind of buy-in by the time you have a full result. So you want to make sure that you know who to tap for which part, because every step is going to be a little different. I'd say the only thing that you want to make sure that when you're thinking about involving people is really thinking about your leadership. Leadership should be involved in some level from the beginning of the process to the end of the process, because of course, when we get to the end, ultimately it's going to be the organization's leadership that helps execute the website and any other marketing kind of strategies they would have. So that's an important part.
And Dustin, we have one question specific to gathering data, and Lori's
Sure.
asking about sample surveys and questions to ask external stakeholders. If we
External
maybe if we
stakeholders.
have some examples, or maybe we can send something to Lori and anyone who wants. Like maybe so Lori, we have a kickoff questionnaire, and we use that as a guide to send to external stakeholders. So I'll have Dustin send that to you, and anyone else who's interested, just send us a message.
Yeah. And, we can kind of talk a little bit more later on about if there are like specific questions one needs to think about asking when they're gathering data. We can go through that at the end if we want to.
All right, fantastic. And thanks to everyone for being active in chat. We're going to ask you to be active yet again. So now we're on the topic of budget, and I'd like to kind of quiz everyone and see what people think. And we'll kind of go through this step by step, first starting with a large agency. So just take a second, put in chat, what type of range of a budget do you think you're to expect to spend as a nonprofit working with a large agency? Let's say 20, an agency about 20 to 50 people. What kind of budget would you expect? And then the next one is, what type of budget would you expect working with a smaller agency? Maybe, 8 to 20 people. And then lastly, what type of budget would you expect to work with like an experienced freelancer? And if you have no idea what to expect, that's okay. Just put it right in chat. But we definitely like to hear from you guys. So don't be shy, Lori, Anne Marie, Ben, Christian, Leah, Meg. I'm interested to see what you guys say. Okay. Leah says 15, 10, 5. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Anne Marie, 20 to 30 for a larger agency, 15 to 20 for a smaller. Yep. Tim says 100,000.
100K. Yep. There we go.
Tim might be near a really big city.
Yep.
All right. All right. You guys really know your stuff here.
I would say three for DIY. That's yeah, there we go.
That's very close. So this is where we're located in Maine, right outside of Boston. And this is what we find to be pretty typical. A lot of you were very spot on. So working with a larger agency, you expect to spend about 30 to 60,000. And obviously the more you spend, the more individuals will be involved. For example, for a smaller agency, you can expect 2 or 3 people on the initial meetings for the website. Usually those are called brand immersion and kickoff meetings. So expect a conference room full of individuals from the larger agency and a conference room full of individuals from your nonprofit. And smaller agencies, again, it's about 2 to 3 people for the initial meeting. With our agency, you expect to have Dustin on that meeting, our creative director and our client strategist. Freelancers, a talented, experienced freelancer, they might have a lighter version of a kickoff and brand immersion, but likely, they're going to be kind of looking for you to drive that a little bit. Dustin, would you say that from your experience as well?
Yeah, because especially I think one thing that's really important to know is like when we're talking about an experienced freelancer, there are some really talented people out there, but usually what I find is that the more talented you are in one department, the less talented you are in others. And generally you're going to find somebody who's really good at the development or is really good at the design. So when you have somebody who's got sort of that multi-skill kind of thing going on, they're generally going to have, you know, some sort of stopgap for working solo, not working in a team. And that's usually where it ends up, where they're more to do as you're requesting and less of them like usually defining the actual deliverable at the end. So they have a little bit more of an expectation that you're going to be driving the bus and they're going to, you know, and they do their part in it.
And Dustin, I guess in that regard, something you mentioned to me too is with agencies, you can expect more attention to your brand and messaging than working with a freelancer. There's just going to be a little more of a deeper dive and attention paid there.
If you can find a developer who's a great designer who can also, you know, write a novel all in one, send them to us. You know? So I have yet to meet one that can do everything.
And in regards to how much to spend, you know, if the website's going to really be a major asset for your organization, I recommend you really should spend as much as you can, because again, you're going to be living with your website for a long time. And Anne Marie, I think, put in the chat, her website was done in 2016, and she's thinking about maybe it's time for a refit. So, you know, that's a long time for that investment. So if it is a major asset and it's going to solve a major problem for your organization, and that could be brand or functionality, you know, it's going to be a really quick return on investment. So, you know, working with an agency and having a little bit of a larger budget is going to be the greatest chance at achieving success. So those are my thoughts on budget, Dustin. Do you have anything else?
No, I think one thing that I'd like to, because somebody put in a price for DIY, and I think that can be quite a variable thing. I think, you know, when an organization decides to do their own website, I really think it's super important to think like, okay, how much does our organizational horsepower cost? And what does that look like to us? So I think it's really important because like that might be a really, you know, small amount for some organizations. For some organizations, you have 2 or 3 internal people working on a website internally. You know, depending on how long that takes, that's costing you way more than if you had connected with a talented freelancer or a smaller agency. So it's important to think about not just energy, but also like what's the cost of time on something like that? Because some organizations might benefit from, you know, having the structure of working with somebody who's especially people have done it before, and done it in an agency setting or done it as an experienced freelancer who's been a part of those larger processes.
Fantastic. So we have a little bit more to go, but if you do want to schedule a quick consultation with Dustin to talk further, because, you know, we're really here to empower all of you. I just wanted to quickly, before we go on to talking about interviewing the right partner and talking about RFPs, feel free to reach out to Dustin through email, or you can even go onto his Calendly and set up a 30-minute Zoom meeting with him.
Yeah, glad to chat.
So Dustin, now going on to talking about finding the right partner, I'd ask you to write down some questions that you had for when interviewing potential partners. So can you take us through some of those?
Yeah. So, you know, some of the questions you have that you need to really ask potential partners is, you're searching out and really thinking about what is, you know, what are they able to do? So, you know, what technology are they building on? Are they a WordPress shop? You know, are they Squarespace? Are they Shopify? Do they know their loadout? Do they use a premium theme? It's really good to ask those questions and sort of prod and poke about, you know, the actual technology that they're building off of, because that can really change how you're going to be, you know, moving forward. One of my big thing is, what is the makeup of the team? I talked, joked a little bit about, talented freelancers not quite having every, having all of their departments really covered for what constitutes an entire website. So I think it's really important to know, like, who's going to be on this project. Do you have an idea of the copywriting staff, the design staff, the creative director? Who do you know who's going to be a part of this project, and what have they worked on before? I think that can really help really identify a successful partner or not. You should also ask, whether it's a cost, a discussion of budget, or if they do or just don't, if they will actually be, writing some of the content for you, are they able to take that off of your plate? Can they do the horsepower part that would take a lot of time from your organization? You may not have the time to be able to do so. So just knowing that there's an option, if they can take, content off of your plate, can be a huge thing. And then thinking about, what are their capabilities? Can they make custom plugins? Can they create custom design? Do they do a little bit more cookie cutter? Do they build off of their own theme, or do they use that premium theme? I think those are important questions, because it can kind of show the different skill levels, the kind of approach that they'll take. And it's the kind of questions you want to have on the back pocket. So, if somebody is surprised by some of these questions, they've never been asked that enough. that should bring up some alarms and say, okay, like, are they going to be the right partner? And especially when we're talking about in the nonprofit space, there's a lot of differentiating parts to nonprofits. Some provide, some are much more in the educational space, some are in the financial space. Some of them, work simply, right, basically in medical. So it's really important to understand if they're going to have experience in that industry, if they've worked with partnerships like yours before, if they're able to, talk the talk, be able to create content and understand the user that's going to come to your website. That can be really important, because, they can be an amazing designer, they can be a great developer, they can have all these things. But, if they don't know what it's like for, a patient or a family member who's trying to help, who's trying to find resources and assistance for, a family member in need, if they don't understand that user experience, that user journey, that can kind of, it can make a difference for you when you're thinking about who to partner with. And then, of course, I think the most important part, whether it is a large agency, small agency, talented freelancer, is what is the process? What are the steps that are taken? How transparent are they about everything that needs to be accomplished? What are the touch points? Where are those, where is that step of approving and gathering content and everything like that? It's super important to know that steps in the process, so you can understand appropriate timelines, and your organization can judge correctly. Because I'm sure once, though the website is undergoing, right, your organization still needs to do things, and then they have to anticipate when a new website is going to be launched and how it needs to function, and making sure everybody's going to be understanding what, there might be a bit of a rollout to try and figure out, getting people to the new site and making sure that they're comfortable with it, and everything like that, especially if it's a website that's built for external audiences and internal audiences within the organization. So what does that process look like, and define it? Those are the questions that I usually have when I think about, like, who's going to be a good partner for this process, because it is a process and it can take a tremendous amount of time from an organization and an agency to be able to accomplish. And you want to make sure that you have a clear roadmap to success right at the beginning.
Great. Thanks for that, Dustin. Meg has her hand raised. She wants to talk. Now, I've never done this on Zoom, everyone. Okay. I'm not as versed as Dustin is on Zoom, so I'm going to try to allow Meg to talk here.
Hey there.
Hey, Meg.
Hi.
Hey, Meg.
Hey. So thanks for, I'm driving, so no chat for me, but didn't want to miss the webinar. So work in the DC, Baltimore area, and I've worked on a couple big website projects, and it's crazy how expensive they've become. And I think it's fair compensation, but I've seen up to $120,000. And I think part of the question to ask is not necessarily the size of the firm that you're going to work with, but what's the size of your organization too. So I was the director of communications, and so it was like I became like the project manager, right? And I was able to take on a pretty big chunk of my time from my other tasks in order to manage the consultants and manage the project and staff and stakeholders and things. So I think one of you had said, like, what is the time that your organization is putting into? But I think recognizing that your employees or your staff at the organization itself is going to need to spend time on it, and making sure that that person doesn't get overwhelmed with doing all of their other duties plus the website. I think that for like nonprofit self-care is very important. So I would say advocate for that. If you're a director of communications or communications, that you do that. And then just because it's going to be hard to mute and unmute, I'm just going to talk for one more second. I think there's a moment in like website design where, you know, a savvy person, you show up at the website and you're like, oh, they stopped asking for help. And you start to see where the nonprofit has changed things. It doesn't quite work. And the graphics, it's like so close, but it's pixelated. So I think another question that I've learned to ask and really plan for from the nonprofit side is the ongoing maintenance and what that contract looks like with whomever you select. So, and also the training aspect. Make sure a lot of your staff, not just one person in the communications department, but a lot of people are trained, and see if your consultant within your original budget can help you create some of those materials. Because, you know, you're going to want to go on vacation and things still need to be posted. Yeah. And so I think that these are just kind of lessons learned on my end that I thought were worthwhile sharing. So thank you for unmuting me here. I'm going to drive carefully here and continue to listen. Thank you.
That's right. Please drive carefully.
Thank you so much for that, Megan. Connect with us. I'd like to hear more, and maybe have you on a webinar with us as kind of a collaborator at some point. That's fantastic advice and experience.
No, and I think that is, you know, we're talking about finding the right partner. That is a huge part. Is it? And I mentioned it earlier too. Is that usually for the life of your site, for the amount of time that's going to be out there, usually it's not just a one and done thing with whoever you're going to be partnering on for a website. So, yeah, knowing their processes, knowing their the way that they're going to maintain and train. We've actually, we understand that very well from where we're at right now. Me and Peter, mostly Peter, but we're working together on a couple of different things. We have one nonprofit whose staffing has shifted greatly over the last couple of years, and one person has the keys to the Facebook account and they're gone, and one person has the keys to the website and they're gone. And we've had to do a lot of work making sure to do some safety bounding to make sure that, you know, nothing's going to go wrong as we start our relationship and start to build a new website for them, because there's quite a few things out of place that need to be addressed, and we can see that no long-term plan or assistance was really baked into the beginning of their first website, which is terrifying for them. So, you know, that's something we definitely think about on our end.
That's a good example, because there was 300 mailers that went out to scholarship recipients.
Oh my God.
That went to a domain that had essentially lapsed. And so the link was no longer working because their previous website partner. So we had to come in and figure it all out. And luckily we were able to get that domain quickly working. And
took a little diplomacy too.
Took some diplomacy. So that's all really fantastic stuff. So yeah, we'll finish up here before we already have some great questions. So I'll finish up here with kind of my thoughts on RFPs, and Dustin, if anything comes up that you think of, chime in. Now, I have a note here, do your own research. Dustin said earlier, don't get too caught up in the nuts and bolts. And I agree with that 100%. You do not want to get too caught up in the nuts and bolts, but you should be aware of the major platforms out there. And
Yep.
Dustin kind of mentioned them. And you should be aware of, if you have a functionality need, you should be aware of what types of options do you have? Is it, what options do you have? It could be, okay, we can build our own WordPress plugin. We can use a plugin that exists. We can use some software out there and have this on a subdomain. So you should kind of just do that high level research to kind of know what solutions are out there. So this is maybe controversial is not the right word, but this is kind of my thought, because when submitting to RFPs, we find that sometimes nonprofits, they look for the team that promises the right solution or promises a solution versus trying to find the right team. From our perspective, you really should, instead of, you should really look for the right team. Who's going to be the team? Because in my opinion, the right team's not going to, in an RFP response where maybe they've had one meeting with you, come to you and say, this is the exact solution you can have. We have to go through that brand immersion, that kickoff meeting. We have to talk to your stakeholders, and we have to come up with the functionality solution that your organization needs. If it's something to do with careers, if you're a larger nonprofit, you're doing a lot of hiring, we need to talk to HR. We need to talk to your development team. We need to talk to your marketing team to figure out what are all the unique challenges and what's going to be the right solution. We can't come up with it just in reading a Word doc RFP. So we really recommend focus on the team that you think is going to be able to get what you need done and build that asset that's going to last for a long time. Now, I'd mentioned don't distract with the obvious. We see this in RFPs a lot with nonprofits. You list all this stuff that any professional web firm is going to do just out of the box. Maybe it will say integrate with Google Analytics. It will say have SEO metadata. Any reputable web firm is going to already include this. Maybe have I think we talked about this, Dustin. Like maybe having a appendix that says any firm we use needs to put all these things on our website. But just don't. I urge you not to distract from the obvious. I think, and this goes into the next point, your RFP really needs to state what your objectives are for your website very clearly. And I think listing all these kind of obvious requirements for your website, it just kind of can take away from that.
Yeah, it needs to be focused on those goals that are set up when you're gaining clarity.
Exactly. And one also thought I had is I wouldn't overcomplicate your RFP. Make it easy for agencies to submit so they can really maybe use their standard format, but focus in on answering the core questions that you have to really evaluate who's going to be that partner. So from my experience, if you make an RFP submission too complicated for the agency, they're going to focus on filling out this complicated RFP versus really getting to the core questions that you need to have answered so you can find the right team. But those were kind of the tips I had at a really high level when we're talking about RFPs. How's that sound, Dustin? Anything to add, or did I cover it pretty well?
So you got it pretty well. I think, whenever I think about this, I do think, that it is going all the way back and planning accordingly, making sure, like, going through that list, like functionality, what are the things that are, that aren't right that we need to make right? What are the things in branding and messaging that are not right we need to make right? Those are the kind of things that when we're looking at an RFP, we want to address, because those are the ones that really need the attention of that solution. And many times it is exactly that solution, it's not prescriptive. It's usually a collaborative approach of figuring out what's going to be the best solution long-term. And the best recommendations are going to be the recommendations after you sit down and have a conversation and start building that relationship. And, and building trust and in making sure that, that partner is the right partner, and they'll go and hound down a domain that's lapsed, things like that, to make sure that, making steps forward, you're going to have the confidence, whether it's at the very beginning of the process or that ongoing maintenance afterwards, or the training, all of those items kind of get addressed when you start having those conversations. And, it's a lot less about, just checking off a box, and more about having a genuine conversation about, finding a solution as a whole team.
All right, so we have had some great questions come in. We do try to keep these webinars brief. So if you have to go back to the important work you're doing at your nonprofit, please go ahead. But Dustin, if you don't mind, maybe we'll throw a couple of these questions back and forth to each other. So the first one, and I'm blanking on who this came from. I think it was Leah or Lori, but their website was designed in 2016. Thinking about having a new website, wondering how has design changed since then? Lori, or Leah, when I hear this question, what I think is, how has your nonprofit changed since then, as really the key question? Because there are a lot of design trends out there, but most commonly what we see is the nonprofits in a very different place, or you're able to, maybe you had to work with a freelancer back then, but now you're able to come and work with an agency that can really dig into your branding and making sure that your design and website really lives up to the work that you can do. So as far as, do you have any thoughts on how designs changed, Dustin? I know in 2016 we saw a lot of premium themes where there was like 1,000 websites that all look the same. So that we still see a little bit of that, but that's a very common theme with nonprofits.
Yeah, what I would say to that is, right, is like 2016 isn't so old that it's like you're as worried about like that kind of .com era unmobile friendly kind of stuff. Like it's,
straight HTML.
Straight HTML. Yeah. Like hopefully that was not what you got in 2016. If that's not a 2016 website, that's an older website. Yeah. So, I mean, when you're thinking about like even a couple of years, it's important to have an understanding of like, yes, design trends do change. There are best practices changing all the time. I'd say probably one of the biggest differences between then and now would be SEO has changed a lot in 6 years. And there's several different schools of thought on SEO and how to best utilize it. So even though it's only a couple of years out, and maybe design, as it's aesthetically looking, may still feel very, within the last couple of years, and it doesn't necessarily feel stale. But there's probably some level of functionality, some portion around it for SEO that probably could be improved. But it's really case by case. I think, if you're worried about like, do you feel like you don't look like you're in the 2020s yet? I think that's a larger question on, does the brand also feel like it's in the 2020s yet? And does that need to change a little bit too, to address why the website might feel or look a little older? I think that's a larger question on branding versus just the website. But I think it creates those conversations of, is our website living up to our brand? Or, is our brand needs to feel like it is in the year 2022. And, is it, does it have that feel? So, I mean, I think that it creates a larger conversation, but it's an important one to have. If you're really looking at it and you're feeling it's not quite there, or it feels a little stale. Those are important questions.
So just to mix it up, another question was about the cost and ensuring response with ongoing support for web projects. I think, our hosting right now is about our monthly hosting and maintenance is about, I think it's about $129 a month if we have a ADA accessibility plugin on there. So I think with a smaller agency, that's what you can expect. With a larger agency, you're probably looking at $500 a month. for website hosting and maintenance. And on the maintenance side, not to get too nerdy, but our program, which I guess I would recommend kind of at a minimal, would be make sure that the team you're working with, are they updating the WordPress core? If you're using WordPress, it's the most likely the platform you're using. Are they updating the theme that hopefully they built? Are they updating all the plugins? We do it once a quarter. It can be, depending on your organization, overkill to do it any more than that. Are they backing it up once a month? Maybe is their server backing it up daily? Those are really good questions to have. And then the PHP one as well for ongoing support. They have, like on our team, we have Ellie, who all our clients love, because her sole role is being responsive to clients and making sure that inquiries on websites are being fulfilled. So do they have an Ellie? Do they have a client strategist? And then we have Zanera on our team, who's a project manager. Do they have a client strategist and a project manager? Do they have someone that's organizing all this? And as things come in from a client, putting in a ticket and then reminding the team, hey, has this done? And then, communicating with the client. So kind of at a minimum, that's what I would be looking for with an agency. Are you going to have a dedicated client strategist, and do they have a project manager to put all your requests into a system? Another good question, Dustin, talking about basically buttons on the top of a home page, kind of calls to action. Like, is there a rule of thumb on having too many? And I know I have strong opinions on this.
Yeah, so I think the most important thing for calls to action really is being decisive, making sure that they are in key places first and foremost, and then seeing where else they need to be addressed. So, I think a lot of it has to be around the strategy of the website of, how are people getting in contact with you? Is it through a form? Is it through phone? Is it through social? Is there an online chat on the site itself? So I think it really all depends on how, there's both ways, right? Can we make it easier for people to connect with you, and how can your organization, what's the best method for them to reach back out? That is usually what becomes the mix of like, okay, well, we're phone people, we're form people, we're email people, we have a dedicated staff that's on and is able to answer your questions on a chat. Whatever the capacity of the organization is, that's where like that point of communication should be set, and that expectation for it to be back and forth. So yeah, I mean, like I am always a fan of having some level of communication, method in like your primary navigation, in your footer. Those should be traveling with you. If it's a chat on the website, it should be, a bubble right hand, right or left side, right at the bottom, right and easy for people to communicate with on mobile. So those are important. Some of our clients, they're phone people. They don't have that dedicated staff. We just make sure that there is a call button on every single page floating with the user at all times, because at some point they're going to want to reach out, and the number one way to reach out to that client is through a quick phone call. So everybody's a little different. I think it's just important to know where are those decisive points of when when is somebody going to make the act of communicating, and are you making it easy for them to do so?
That's great. And I guess decisive is a great word, because less is more. And it's important to really think about what are the important ones you need on there, and to really reduce the clutter with the stuff that could be further down the navigation, or maybe you can have a mega menu. And so that's kind of what I think the call to action. And then thinking about, how do people actually view websites? And it's really left to right. They scan left to right, top to bottom. So, if I know, for example, we've worked with a consultant for a nonprofit that works with seniors, and phone tap to call was very important on their website. And the thought was, let's kind of simplify the navigation and have that call to action, which is the most important one, right at the top, and a super header. So just kind of having those conversations and and thinking through what do we actually need and what is actually going to distract users away from the journey we want to take them on and the information that we need them to see.
Looks like we have time enough for one more question.
All right, one more question. We've got a bunch of good ones, so that is tough. Leah, we are going to send you the kickoff questionnaire and to Anne-Marie as well. From Tim, how common is it for a vendor who builds your site to also offer ongoing support post-launch? I think if you're working with an agency, that's extremely common. They're gonna prefer it because they're gonna build the site in a way that they know how to maintain it. And so, some freelancers, if they're working on Squarespace, their thought is probably Squarespace is going to maintain it, and they might not really be set up to maintain it, but I would say that's extremely common. All right.
Yeah. And I do think look at the fine print, look at the full, ongoing support is going to usually be a different, itemed thing. There's going to be a different contract for it. Read through that contract, see what's offered in it, and make sure that you're covering your bases and know exactly the things that Peter was talking about earlier, updating, what's their policy on domain and expiration and stuff like that. Backups, where is it backed up? How many times is it backed up? Those are good questions to have for if you're thinking about ongoing support. Make sure that they have it's not just a handshake deal. There's a real contract. It's something that they should be providing and have it itemized for you.
Well, thank you everyone for attending. Again, if you want 30 minutes to pick Dustin's brain, I recommend it. You have his Calendly link there. Connect with us on LinkedIn and connect with Anania Bailey on Facebook and Instagram. We're really here to empower nonprofits like yours. So, feel free to reach out and thank you all so much.
Yeah, indeed. Thanks, everybody.
All right, everyone.